It began on a day like any other. The sun climbed the sky, casting long shadows. In a quiet corner of town, a small thrift shop stood unassuming, second-hand serendipity. Inside, aisles overflowed with forgotten trinkets and silent stories. On this afternoon, someone browsed, searching for something unique. They found a candle, simple, unadorned, a curious shade of gray. It seemed out of place, almost as if it didn't belong to this world. The decision to buy it was impulsive. The shopkeeper barely glanced at it, naming a pittance for the price. The candle was slipped into a bag, a seemingly innocent transaction. But something unseen left the store that day. Something that would soon unravel the very fabric of understanding. The story had begun. The candle found a new home, placed on a mantelpiece. For days, it sat as a mere decoration. Then, one quiet evening, a match was struck. The candle was lit, an ordinary act. But this flame was different. The wax didn't melt down. Instead, it seemed to grow, crawling upwards. The observer leaned closer, disbelief growing. Was it a trick of the light, a faulty candle? No, this was something else. The flame flickered, almost mockingly, as the candle grew taller. The laws of physics bent and broke in that small, flickering light. The cozy ambiance vanished, replaced by a chilling sense of the unnatural. The truly unbelievable had arrived. Nothing would be the same. The candle was extinguished, but the image lingered. The observer tried to rationalize faulty wick, strange wax. But soon, a memory surfaced, vivid, detailed, and not their own. It felt real yet belonged to a life they'd never lived. The connection to the candle was undeniable. Each time it was lit, a new false memory bloomed in the mind of someone nearby. The violation was chilling a whisper from somewhere, or someone else. The candle's true secret was revealed. It rewrote personal history. The quiet street and dusty thrift store had unleashed something unknown. Impossible recollections began to spread. Fear took root. The world had shifted, and there was no going back. Her name was Eleanor Vance. A quiet woman, lover of books and rainy afternoons. Second-hand serendipity was her regular haunt. She wasn't looking for mystery, but the candle called to her. It was an impulse buy, uncharacteristic for Eleanor. Her apartment was neat, filled with cherished old things. The candle was an anomaly, intriguing her precise nature. She believed in logic, in explanations, but a part of her felt a pull, a whisper of the unknown. That afternoon, she unpacked her purchases. A chipped teacup, a worn novel, and the candle. It felt cool, heavier than it looked, anonymous. Just an object waiting for a flame. Eleanor felt a faint shiver. The stage was set, the unknown waited. Dusk settled over the city. Eleanor prepared her evening tea, comforted by routine. The candle sat on her mantelpiece, a silent sentinel. It didn't quite fit, drawing her gaze again and again. Rain pattered against the window. The thought flickered. Why not light it? She struck a match, held the flame to the wick. The candle caught, burning with a steady glow. An ordinary act, or so it seemed, but the ordinary was about to shatter. Some decisions, however small, change everything. The candle's purpose was about to be revealed. The night would not be ordinary. Eleanor watched the flame brighter, more vigorous than expected. Shadows writhed on the walls. The wax didn't melt down, it swelled, climbing upwards. Eleanor leaned closer, disbelief etched on her face. This defied everything she knew. Candles consumed themselves, they didn't grow. She blinked, rubbed her eyes, but the impossible continued. The flame created, not destroyed, a tiny, impossible miracle or a terrifying omen. The room felt cold, despite the bright flame. The ordinary evening fractured. The impossible had arrived. The candle's secret was no longer hidden. Eleanor's world would never be the same. The unknown had come home. Eleanor stood frozen, minutes stretching into eternity. Her mind screamed for explanation, a trick, a mechanism, a novelty. But this was no hoax. She considered extinguishing the flame, but curiosity held her. She would measure, observe, document. The candle offered no clues, only its silent, impossible performance. The flame burned on, upwards, mocking reason. Finally, she found a ruler, determined to prove her senses wrong. The need for evidence warred with the urge to flee. But Eleanor had to know, even if knowing was terrifying. The candle continued its waxy ascent, unbothered. Some mysteries demand to be faced, and Eleanor was not one to turn away. The candle burned for an hour, growing taller. Eleanor measured, recorded, her hand shaking. Eventually she blew it out, the room plunging into gloom. She tried to distract herself, but the candle's presence was overwhelming. Then, it happened. A memory bloomed in her mind. She was a child, running down a country lane chasing a white dog. The memory was vivid, real. Except it wasn't hers. She had grown up in the city, never owned a dog. Dread washed over her. The memory was an intruder, a beautiful, terrifying lie. She pressed her hands to her temples, but it clung. The candle had done this. Eleanor was no longer just an observer, she was its first unwilling participant. The impossible had claimed her, and the story was only beginning. The days that followed were a torment for Eleanor Vance. That false memory, the sun-dappled lane, the little white dog, it clung to her. It felt as real, as potent, as any genuine recollection from her long life. She would be washing dishes, and suddenly, the scent of phantom wildflowers would fill her senses. She would be reading her book, and the joyous laughter of that unknown child, her phantom self, would echo in her ears. This unwelcome guest in her mind refused to leave. It was a constant, unsettling reminder of the candle's terrifying power, a power she couldn't comprehend. She tried to reason it away. Stress, she told herself. An overactive imagination. Perhaps she dreamt it and the dream had felt unusually vivid, but deep down, she knew. It was the candle. That impossible, upward-burning flame had seared more than just an image into her mind. It had branded her with a life not her own. Sleep offered little escape. The memory played behind her eyelids, a beautiful, disturbing film. Who was that child? Where was that lane? Questions without answers spun endlessly, creating a web of anxiety. Eleanor considered telling someone, her neighbor perhaps, Mrs. Henderson, always eager for a chat over the garden fence. But what would she say? That a thrift store candle burned in reverse and implanted memories? Mrs. Henderson would offer her a cup of strong tea. And then, likely, call Eleanor's distant nephew with concerned whispers. The thought of being dismissed as senile, as delusional, was almost as frightening as the memory itself. So Eleanor kept her silence, a lonely sentinel guarding a terrible, unbelievable secret. The candle itself sat on the mantelpiece, now an object of profound dread. She thought of throwing it away, burying it in the garden, smashing it to pieces, but a strange paralysis held her back. Was it fear or a perverse curiosity? What other secrets did it hold? What other lives could it conjure? The candle was a Pandora's box, and she, its unwilling, terrified custodian. The silence in her small apartment grew heavier, weighted by the unshared burden of an impossible truth, and the lingering echo of a childhood that never was. Days turned into a week. Eleanor grew more withdrawn, avoiding the room where the candle sat. The false memory continued its unwelcome intrusions. Martha, her friend from the local book club, noticed the change. "Eleanor dear, are you quite all right?" Martha asked. "You seem troubled." And so, in hushed tones, Eleanor told her story of the peculiar candle and the impossible memory. Martha listened patiently. She didn't laugh, she didn't dismiss. Martha was intrigued. "And it gives you memories? Could I see this candle, Eleanor?" Eleanor hesitated. A part of her screamed, "No, protect Martha, don't let this strange thing touch anyone else." But another part, a desperate, lonely part, yearned for validation. If Martha saw it, if Martha experienced something, then Eleanor wouldn't be alone in her unbelievable reality. And so, with a sense of trepidation that chilled her to the bone, she agreed. Martha came over the following afternoon. The gray, unassuming candle was presented. It looked so ordinary in the daylight, so harmless, just a pillar of wax. Martha examined it closely, turned it over in her hands, sniffed it. "It just looks like an old candle," she remarked, a hint of skepticism in her voice. Eleanor's heart sank a little. Perhaps it had all been a hallucination. Perhaps the candle's strange behavior was a one-time fluke. "Light it," Eleanor whispered, her voice barely audible. "You have to light it to see." The request hung in the air, heavy with unspoken fear and anticipation. Martha, ever practical but now undeniably intrigued by Eleanor's earnest fear, found the matches. With a steady hand, Martha struck a match and lit the wick. They watched. Together. The flame caught, small at first, then grew, brighter, stronger, and then it began. The slow, impossible ascent of the wax. The flame that consumed nothing, yet seemed to grow. Martha gasped. A small, sharp intake of breath. Her skepticism vanished, replaced by wide-eyed astonishment. "Eleanor," she breathed. It's doing it. It's burning upwards." There it was. Confirmation. Eleanor wasn't mad. The candle was truly unnervingly unnatural. They watched for nearly half an hour, mesmerized by the silent, physics-defying spectacle. The room was quiet, save for their soft breaths and the almost imperceptible flicker of the unnatural flame. Then, Martha, feeling a growing unease that mirrored Eleanor's earlier experience, blew it out. The candle, slightly taller, sat innocently on the coffee table. "Remarkable," Martha said, though her voice was shaky. "Utterly remarkable." They talked for a while, trying to find rational explanations, failing. The next morning, Martha called Eleanor. Her voice was strained. "Eleanor," she said, "I remember being a pilot. In the war. I flew a Spitfire." Martha had never even been in a small plane. The candle had struck again. Martha's vivid experience shattered any doubts. The memory of dogfights, aviation fuel, fear and thrill, it was as real to her as her own name. Two women now shared an impossible secret. They were the first members of an unwilling club. Martha confided in her son, David. Initially, David was skeptical, but Martha was insistent, and spoke with such conviction that David's skepticism began to waver. Something had clearly happened. And so, the story began to leak. Whispers started, the first ripples in their small community. The whispers grew, from tentative murmurs to hushed, excited conversations. The story of the strange candle, the candle that defied nature and implanted memories, began to circulate beyond Eleanor and Martha's immediate circle. It was the kind of tale that small towns latch onto, something to break the monotony of everyday life, something that hinted at the unknown, lurking just beneath the surface of the ordinary. The details shifted with each telling, as such stories often do. Some said the candle glowed with an eerie light. Others claimed it whispered secrets when it burned. The second-hand Serendipity thrift store, once just a cluttered shop, gained a new mysterious aura. People started going there, not just for bargains, but with a new kind of curiosity. They'd eye the shelves of old candles with a mixture of hope and trepidation. Was this the one? Could they find an object of such strange power? The shopkeeper, blissfully unaware of the specific legend she had unwittingly unleashed, merely noticed a slight uptick in the sale of old, unremarkable candles. She probably just thought people were preparing for a power outage. Fear and fascination are potent partners. The story of the reverse melting candle and its memory-inducing properties tapped into both. Some were openly dismissive. Nonsense, they'd scoff. Old wives' tales. But even they perhaps felt a tiny prickle of curiosity. A what-if that they wouldn't voice aloud. Others were more credulous, or perhaps more open to the possibility that the world held wonders and terrors beyond their everyday comprehension. They wanted to know more. Who had the candle now? Had anyone else lit it? What memories had they received? The legend was taking root, growing like an unseen vine through the community. Eleanor and Martha, the original witnesses, found themselves at the quiet center of this burgeoning folklore. They didn't seek the attention, indeed they shied away from it. But the story had escaped their control. It now belonged to the town, a shared secret, a local mystery. The candle that melts in reverse was no longer just an object, it was becoming a phenomenon, a chilling, captivating legend whispered in the deepening shadows of an otherwise ordinary place. The stage was set for further, more alarming developments. The whispers eventually reached ears beyond the local coffee shops. They found their way to Thomas Ashton, a freelance journalist. Ashton specialized in the unusual, the unexplained, not ghosts and goblins usually, more like unsolved local mysteries, cold cases. He had a reputation for being thorough, skeptical, but with an open mind if the evidence pointed somewhere strange. The tale of a reverse burning candle, implanting memories, it sounded like prime material. Too bizarre to be true, probably, but too intriguing to ignore. He decided a trip to the small town was in order. Ashton arrived on a crisp autumn morning. The town seemed sleepy, quaint, hardly the backdrop for a supernatural crisis. He started his inquiries subtly, at the local diner, the library. He mentioned an interest in local folklore, peculiar stories. It didn't take long for the candle legend to surface. The names Eleanor Vance and Martha Prentice were mentioned. Ashton jotted them down in his worn notebook. His initial assessment, mass hysteria perhaps, or a simple misunderstanding, magnified by gossip. He'd seen it before, but he would reserve judgment. For now. He arranged to meet Eleanor first. She was hesitant, wary of his journalistic intentions, but Ashton was patient. He reassured her. He just wanted to understand. Eleanor, worn down by her secret, finally relented. She recounted her story. The thrift store discovery, the impossible flame, the vivid stolen memory of a childhood lane. Ashton listened intently. He watched her expressions, her body language. She seemed genuinely distressed, not like someone fabricating a tale for attention. He then spoke with Martha. Her story corroborated Eleanor's, the Spitfire, the terror, the unshakable reality of it. Ashton remained outwardly neutral, but inwardly, a flicker of something more than professional curiosity sparked. These weren't flighty individuals. They were articulate, grounded. Their fear, their confusion felt authentic. He asked to see the candle. They agreed, though reluctantly. It sat on Eleanor's mantelpiece, unassuming, gray, innocent. Ashton examined it, weighed it in his hand, just an old candle. Yet, it was the crucible of these incredible claims. He knew what he had to ask next. He needed to see it burn. For himself, the true test. The atmosphere in Eleanor's living room was thick with anticipation. Eleanor, Martha, and now, Thomas Ashton, the skeptic, the journalist, ready to observe, ready to debunk, if possible. Eleanor's hand trembled slightly as she reached for the matches. Ashton watched her every move. He noted the reluctance, the genuine fear in her eyes. This wasn't a performance for his benefit. This was something that truly unsettled these women. He had his camera ready, his notebook open, prepared to document whatever happened or didn't happen. The match was struck. The flame touched the wick. It caught, burning with that same unnerving vibrancy Eleanor and Martha had described. Ashton leaned forward, his gaze fixed on the candle. He expected, well, he wasn't sure what he expected. Perhaps a slight optical illusion, a trick of the wax, something easily explained away. But then it began. The slow, undeniable upward creep of the wax. The flame not consuming but seemingly generating, defying the most basic laws of physics, right before his very eyes. Ashton felt a chill, not of fear, not yet, but of profound disbelief. He moved closer, examined it from different angles. He even timed it, measured the candle's height before and after a short period. The evidence was irrefutable. The candle was growing, regenerating as it burned. His mind, trained to find logical explanations, raced. He considered hidden mechanisms, chemical tricks, but the candle was simple. Solid wax, no apparent contrivances. He was witnessing something genuinely impossible, something that shattered his understanding of how the world worked. He let it burn for nearly an hour, taking notes, snapping photographs. Eleanor and Martha watched him, their expressions a mixture of vindication and shared anxiety. Finally, Ashton asked Eleanor to extinguish it. The flame died, the upward flow ceased. Silence descended. Ashton looked at the candle, then at the two women. His skepticism had taken a significant blow. He still wasn't sure what it was, but he knew it wasn't a hoax, not a simple one anyway. The investigation had just become far more complex, and far more unsettling. He hadn't yet considered the memories. News of Ashton's visit spread fast. The story of the candle intensified, piquing the interest of the curious and the reckless. David, Martha's son, found himself in a difficult position. His mother's conviction chipped away at his doubt. Friends pestered David to try the candle. Against his better judgment, David agreed. 4 of them gathered in David's study. The flame took hold, defying logic. They watched, transfixed, as unease crept into the room. The next morning, Ben called David, confessing, "I remember being a stonemason in France centuries ago. The candle had claimed another mind." Ben's experience sent shockwaves through the community. The science teacher was haunted by vivid recollections of medieval France. The details were astounding, an immersive sensory experience. This deepened the mystery and the fear. Journalist Thomas Ashton investigated, documenting Ben's impossible memory. He explored psychological theories, but the candle's anomaly defied easy categorization. Were these memories from somewhere else? Ashton researched local history, seeking inexplicable events. What if it was something older, darker? The victims struggled, their sense of self fractured. The community was on edge, the fascination now tinged with fear. The unknown was potentially damaging. Ashton's investigation deepened. He felt on the cusp of something significant yet frustratingly elusive. He re-interviewed Eleanor and Martha, probing for forgotten details about the thrift store and the candle. As Ashton delved deeper, a sense of being watched emerged. Others too were experiencing strange things. Were these isolated incidents, or connected to the candle and the forces it unleashed? The investigation was taking on a sinister dimension. The candle felt like a beacon, attracting unwanted attention. Ashton felt a growing urgency to understand what was happening. The mystery was becoming a dangerous game, and the stakes were getting higher. The air in Eleanor's living room was heavy with unspoken fears. Thomas Ashton, the journalist, found himself at a crossroads, having witnessed the unbelievable. The gray candle defied all known laws. It grew, gifting, or cursing, memories. The pull of the unknown was a siren song. They would light the candle one last time, a final attempt to understand the abyss. Ashton would document everything. Who would offer their mind to the flame this time? Young Sarah, David's adventurous friend, stepped forward. She was fascinated, wanting to know, to feel it. The matches were produced. The flame was about to be kindled. Sarah struck the match. The tiny spark flared. She touched it to the wick. The flame caught. The familiar, impossible spectacle unfolded once more. Sarah sat, her eyes fixed on the hypnotic dance of the unnatural fire. Then, Sarah's expression changed. Her breathing grew rapid. A low sound escaped her lips, a sound of pure terror. She started to speak, fragmented words, images of cold, of darkness, of being hunted. She described a world devoid of light, a primal landscape of fear, a memory not of a human life lived but of a species' deepest horror. When Ashton extinguished the flame, Sarah collapsed, sobbing. The most terrifying memory yet had been unveiled. The aftermath left Sarah in shock. The cozy living room felt violated, tainted by primal fear. Sarah was inconsolable. The memory clung to her like a shroud, a raw emotional wound. Eleanor and Martha tried to comfort her, but what comfort could words offer against such dread? Thomas Ashton felt a cold unlike any he had ever known. This was dangerous. The candle seemed to tap into something darker, something that perhaps should never be accessed. The investigation had reached a terrifying impasse. What could he report? Who would believe him? They decided the candle could never be lit again. The risk was too great, but what to do with it? Leaving them adrift in a sea of chilling possibilities, and the fear that the candle was not the only one. The candle was entrusted to Eleanor, its unwilling custodian. She hid it in the attic, out of sight, but never out of mind. The questions it raised continued to burn. What was its purpose? Its origin? The town returned to normal. The candle's story became a local legend. But for those who witnessed its flame, life would never be the same. The candle sits in darkness, waiting. Is it truly over? Or is the flame merely biding its time? The riddle remains, unextinguished, forever.